be working with maps. We're going to have some tips and also how to add line of sight. I would hope this video will help you because a lot of individuals who start off using Fantasy Grounds are not certain of the limitations. So we're going to talk about that first. And we're going to prepare this image to be imported into Fantasy Grounds. So right now I have it loaded in Corel Paint Shop Pro. So this is a pretty large file. So dimensionally, this file is huge. So it is pretty nice quality. Like when you zoom in, it doesn't get blurry. It's pretty nice. How unfortunately, this map is too big for Fantasy Grounds. So, or at least too big for the recommended sizing. So I'm going to go into my windows here, and let me see if I can make this bigger. So I have three versions here. I have one version that's already been converted to WebP format. So that's a compression ratio. And this is 37 megabytes. That's a pretty big file. This one here is the same file, but it's in JPEG. This is at 57 megabytes. And that's a pretty big size file, but this doesn't have a grid baked into it. This other one here is the same as these, except for it has the grid already on it. I would recommend trying to find maps that don't already have the grid baked into it, especially if you plan on importing it into Fantasy Grounds and if you want the lines to line up. So in other words, sometimes these lines get distorted if you convert the map or if you change the size depending on the ratio. So just as an idea of what this thing is 16,200 by 10,800 dimensionally. So that's a 1.5 ratio or a 3:2 ratio. That's a really big map. That's like, that'll cover like a whole wall. This is for like poster printing here. So this is typically what you'll see in a lot of different complaints or troubleshooting in Fantasy Grounds, is that people will import these ginormous maps and they don't realize the limitations or the fact that these files are just too big physically for Fantasy Grounds. And if you're going to share it across a network to your players online, this can be very problematic. There are also memory limitations, that sort of thing. But generally speaking, we want to get this size of the map down. If you can find maps that are already at the correct size at 4K or less, that's great. So 4K is essentially, 4 times less than this. So let's take a look at the math involved here. So this is not something you typically have to deal with very much, but I used a generative AI tool to help me with this, with the math. So to scale down this map that's 16 by 10 or 1000K or whatever, we want to get it down to 3840 by 2160. So that's roughly the resolution of 4K if you look at it as a rectangle. So you have to calculate the scaling factor and apply it to both the width and the height to maintain the proper proportions. So in other words, you take the width over the height, and in this case it equals 16,200 over 10,800, which equals 1.5. So that's the aspect ratio. Another way of saying 1.5 is aspect ratio is 3:2, which can or will be maintained during scaling. So we want to keep that 3:2 ratio. I did try to change it to a 4K resolution down to a 16:9 aspect ratio. But since the original has a different configuration for length and width, we want to try to keep it at 3:2, because when you scale it like that, you try to change the overall dimensions, you start losing the squareness or the way that it kind of stretches it, in other words. So you don't want stretching as much as possible. And that's why quite often you'll find maps where the grid's baked into it, they're not actually square anymore, they're kind of rectangular. And that's because whoever did the conversion or whoever changed the map and tried to resize it to their liking didn't do it mathematically. So what we're going to do is I said, okay, well, that's not a good thing, because this will mess with that stretching, and it will really could possibly make it a little bit more I'd say worse for the conversion. So what we're going to do is, instead of choosing the closest dimension, what we're going to do is say, okay, let's maintain the aspect ratio of 3:2. Let's not try to do something drastic. So the dimensions that we're going to want to go to, instead of doing that, when we want a 3:2 ratio, is essentially we want to keep the 1/1.5 aspect ratio, and we're going to scale it down to 3840 by 2560. And that will be within the parameters for Fantasy Grounds, because quite often you'll make huge maps that are way beyond these dimensions. This is kind of the important part here. A lot of people think it's just a file size. Well, it's actually also the physical dimensions of the image. That's the main issue. So that's something you want to avoid if you're going to be trying to use gigantic maps. And I know a lot of people make their own and they export them. They work just fine. But once you add them to Fantasy Grounds and you add line of sight and you try to share them across the network online with your friends, it started giving you performance issues. Sometimes they won't even load at all. It just depends on the end users. So now that we have that kind of explained, now I'm going to go back to the program that I was using. So this was this is the Paint Shop Pro, or you can use whatever software you have, but I'm going to adjust the image size. So I'm going to go to, let's see, we want to go to image resize. So this is the original size, and we want to do it by pixels, which is what we're doing. And the numbers that we want to maintain is the fact that, let's see, let's go back to our math here. So we want 3840 over 2560. So that's, width and height. So we're going to go 3840. And then down here is 2560. It automatically did it because the aspect ratio is locked. So that's what we're doing here. So I'm not going to mess around with any of these settings, and it shows the aspect ratio is 1.5, so our math is correct. And we're going to resize all layers if there was extra layers. I don't think there is. And this is, I believe, a JPEG file, or maybe it's PNG, but either way, it's a really huge file. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And it's going to take it a few minutes. So if you notice, it's not really quick. It's actually pretty, fairly slow. So now this is the actual image, and there's no grid baked into this one, thank God. So that'll make it a little bit easier when we go to put this in Fantasy Grounds. So this is something that you'll have to really watch if you're going to be putting a map into a program and resizing it, is the ratio. You got to maintain the aspect ratio, and hopefully you have the whole map and not just a scan or something odd. So let's go ahead and save this. So I'm going to hit File, Export, and we're going to go to let's see, now I just want to save as. And it's already in WebP format, so I don't need to do that. And what we want to do is probably put underscore resized. So we'll have a different version of it. That way we're not overriding the original. So this is the original file. It was pretty big. It's like 37.5 megabytes, and it's just huge dimensionally. So we're going to hit save, and it should take this, and it basically took this down about 3 or 4 sizes. So now I'm going to close the image editor, and I'm going to start up Fantasy Grounds in a new session. So I'm creating a campaign. I'm just going to call it 5e Map Tools Work. So this is just going to be where I work on maps. I would normally work in the core rule set, but if you're going to use most of these maps for 5e, I'll just build it in there. But if you want something a little bit more universal that's not set to any specific rule set, you can build it also in the core rule set. That's probably a better bet if you're trying to make a product that is going to be used universally in different rule sets. So in this case, this is just going to be 5e. And the one reason I'm picking this, because I'm familiar with 5e, but also because I'll have tokens and NPCs and stuff so I can check my work. So that's why I have this set up here. I'm not going to use any extensions. There's no need to. I'm going to go ahead and hit start. and get this session going. So this is a brand new campaign. So we're going to take the image that we made and place that into the Fantasy Grounds folder. So here's the resized version. So now that I look at this, it's 3840 by 2560 dimensionally, and the file size itself is 3.18. So that's not bad compared to, this was, let's see, this was 16,200 by 10,800 at 37.5 megabytes. That's a really big file. And this is the thing you want to avoid when you are using Fantasy Grounds or any virtual tabletop at that. It might be okay locally, so if you're just going to use your computer and show it up on a TV screen, probably not a big deal. But when you want to actually share it across the network, you know, you're connected to people online, yeah, that's where you're going to start running into issues potentially. And it only takes one person's computer that can't handle the dimensions and the file size and all that. And it'll just come to a crashing halt, or it'll be to the point where they can't load the file or whatever. So you just got to kind of watch that. So I'm going to take this file, and I'm actually going to copy this and bring it into Fantasy Grounds. So this, for the test campaign, I don't really need a bunch of stuff loaded. I don't have to do a whole lot. So I'm just going to click off the show on load, and I'm actually going to move this over because I don't always want it to show up right here in the middle. Now it's important that you move things around in the beginning so you know where they're going to show up, and you don't want them to show up right dead center in the middle every time you open it. And now I'm going to hit next. I'm just going to load the SRD. That's all I need. I don't need a bunch of rules, a bunch of stuff. That's just enough so I can check my maps. And you're getting the bestiary, the data, and magic items. That should be enough to test. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit next, and then finish. So this is a brand spanking new campaign. And what I'm going to do first is add the assets to Fantasy Grounds. So if I go to Library and go to Assets, you'll come up with this Assets folder. Now there's no campaign folder in here yet because I haven't added any content. So if you click on Images, which is where this is going to be stored, and then you click on Folder, it's going to take you to the back end of this campaign folder in Images. So I'm going to go ahead and make a subfolder. So I'm going to call this Demonic Prison. So new folder, Demonic Prison. And then it's going to open that folder up, and then I'm going to paste that in here. So now you see you have this big file name here. You don't have to necessarily keep that. If you want to rename that at this point, it's a good time to do it. So what I might do is get rid of some of this prefix here, and I'm just going to put map underscore demonic prison arena and just leave it like that. And this is going to be the actual title for the file. It's important that you do this if you've got a bunch of weird file names, or you want a unique hierarchy for sorting your files. So this helpful to do this now instead of waiting till after you've already linked it to stuff. So this is a good way to manage the files before you even put them in the Fantasy Grounds. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. Once you've changed, added, moved things around, or renamed anything, you want to click on Refresh Folder Assets. So I'm going to do that. And once you do that, there's a campaign folder now. If I click on that, this got the subfolder, the Demonic Prison folder. I click on that, there's the actual file. If I click on that, there's the preview. So this is the preview image of the map that I'm going to work on in Fantasy Grounds. So what you want to do here is you want to add this to a map record if you want this to be a part of your campaign. So if I open up the, if I just click on create map record, it'll pop up. It'll be in an image, but I want to go ahead and make my own category first. So I always do this as kind of a best practice. So if I go to campaign and go to images, I'm going to set up a new directory or a new group so that whenever I make anything, it's going to go into a certain group. So you use the drop down menu, click on this little green plus button. This is add category. And by the way, this is universal to most rule sets. It may look a little different, but the procedure is the same. So then I'm going to go ahead and click on this group 1 right here. So I want to click on Edit List. And what I want to do is put, I'll just put line of LOS maps or something like that, just so I know what it is. And now that I have that, I'm going to get out of the edit mode and select the new group. All this is kind of a separator, like a filter. And now what I'll do is I'll say create map record, or you can drag this image into here, however you want to do it. So create map record. There we go. So now it is it's actually a record for Fantasy Grounds. It's actually part of the campaign now. So now that that's in there, now we can start thinking about working on this and how we want to attack it. So this is an important aspect of Fantasy Grounds that you have to kind of get used to. You have to practice, those sort of things. So I want to get it centered to where I can see most of it, and I don't have a bunch of stuff in the way, and got it stretched out so we can see what's going on. And that's a pretty good start. You kind of want it in a place where you can find it and it's not covered or covering up a bunch of stuff. It just works so much better if you got a clean slate. And then I'm going to take the top link up here, the top left, and I'm drag and drop it down to the hotkeys below. That way, if I accidentally close it or something, I can just pop it right back up. So now what I'm going to do is start thinking about how do I want to attack this. So there's quite a bit of complexity to this particular image. I recommend you try to keep your maps less complex than this. So this could be very time consuming, problematic, annoying, those sort of things. So I'm going to try my best to try to attack this without creating a bunch of extra work and then using certain tools at certain points of creating the line of sight for this map. So I'm going to start with the red lines or the occluders first, and then I'll do all the doors and those sort of things. This map is a little bit strange because of some of the way the walls are drawn in here. So you don't necessarily have to have a thick wall. You just need a straight line through here, and I think that'll make it easier and it will take less time. So what you want to do is just start off making all your lines. Even if they intersect, it's okay. You can go back in later and remove it. So what we're going to do is go to the map tools, and up on the top toolbar, we're going to go to line of sight. And then you have a different type of line of sight. So in this case, this is going to be a wall. And then you have the line tool. So we're going to use the line tool to create this. However, if you want to make a big rectangle first, you can do that. So I might do that just for the very outside here. So I'll go to the rectangle tool, and I'm just going to start up in the top left corner, single left click, hold down the left mouse button. Oops, see, it already messed up. So I'm going to hit Control Z to get out of it. So I need to take my time and left click and hold the mouse button down. Otherwise, it's going to draw a gazillion squares. So that's pretty close. You don't have to be dead nuts or exact. This is close enough. So that's just a starting point. This is going to encompass or encapsulate this whole area. Now what we're going to do is start making lines across here. Some of the major lines that'll be a part of this. And so I'm going to go to the line tool, and I'm just going to take and drag the line all the way through, like the center here. And I'm not going to worry about, what it's intersecting or anything, because we're going to go back and cut all that out. We just want to get all the lines done first. And this is probably going to save you a lot of time in the long run. So if I single click and hold the shift key, that'll keep this line straight. And that's not exactly where I wanted it. So I'm going to hit escape, and I'm going to come down just a hair, single click, hold down the shift key, and come across. That's a little closer, but not quite. So when you start getting into that, or you're getting too perfect, that's when this stuff starts taking too much time. So I'm just going to live with that. I got it down a little bit. It's fine. It'll work. So I'm just going to go ahead and double click, and that will end the line. You can see it left this little tail, and it's crossing through areas that it shouldn't, but that's not a big deal right now. What we're trying to do now is just put in all the lines that are going to be needed for this particular dungeon. or in this case, the prison. So again, I'm going to come out here to the left and single click, hold down the shift key and drag over. I'm not holding the mouse button down. And now I'll double click to end the line. And there we go. There's another line. So I'm going to go through here and systematically go through all these and put all the lines in. So here's a major line right here. I don't know if this is supposed to be like a wall that has holes so you can look into here or not, but I'm just going to assume it's a solid line. So again, I'm just going to take and grab something from here. Perhaps I'll take this, bring it out here to the left, hold down shift, drag over, and it goes all the way through all those lines. That's going to save me a lot of headache down the road, because what will happen is if you try to make one little line at a time, it's really going to take forever. So I'm kind of killing a lot of birds with one stone by doing that. And that's going to help you speed up your process. It's going to help you make it a lot more efficient. And you're not going to be spending all day, trying to plot little lines here and there. You just want these major lines taken out, and then you kind of work on the little fine details at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and hit shift again, come all the way across, and double click. So all I'm trying to do is capture all these horizontal lines for right now. And I'm going to do the same thing here. So single click, hold shift, drag across. And this one doesn't look like it lines up with anything in particular. So I might go a little further up and then single click, hold shift, drag this over, and a double click here. So I'm not going to worry about it. Coming down to this point here, maybe there isn't anything to line this up with, but I'm going to go ahead and click on this texture here, hold down shift, drag over, and just double click. So I don't care if it's crossing through anything right now. So we're going to remove all that out. So again, we're going to come down the center here. So single click, and let me look at that. Yep, so single click here, hit shift, drag, and it's not quite landing on this block here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit escape. I didn't double click on the end. I didn't finish the line. And I'll come over here now instead, since I'm trying to capture that part, and hit shift, and there we go. So sometimes it's better to come out from the other direction so you can see where you got to go. And let's do this one. So again, single click, and then I'm going to hit shift, single click, shift, and to just move the mouse over. I'm not holding the mouse button down. And now just double click on the mouse button to end the line. So you just do this until all of your vertical lines are lined up. Now you may not have to do this if you have a simple map and it's only got a few lines, but something this complicated and this large, you're going to want to find a method to your madness. And a lot of it has to do with how you're organized, and familiarity with the process too helps. So again, I'm going to come up here, single click, and drag over to the left. And it looks like, I don't know if yeah, that's fine. And now I'm going to do this line here and this line here. So there's another line in here that I wasn't anticipating, but no big deal. So same thing, just come across and grab those. And then we got another line probably coming straight down here through the middle. So I'll go ahead and start over here. Left click, shift, hold that down, drag over, double click. That ends that line. So that's most, if not all, of the vertical lines required here. There may be something here that I want to do with this, but other than that, we got a majority of those lines in here. So now what we're going to do is start looking at the vertical lines and come down. And it's the same process. I'm going to hold shift, find a starting point, and just single left click, drag down, and then double click to end the line. And I'm going to do the same thing here. So we got this line here and come down. That's a little bit too far over. So I'm going to hit escape, start over, single click, hold shift, and there you go. Bob's your uncle there. So there's that. And I did forget a line down here. So I'm going to single click, drag this over, and there we go. So you'll find that as you go through. And that's why another reason it's good to do it this way, because you'll have different directions covered and you'll notice other things that you miss. So they're like up here, there's this line coming down from this doorway. So what I want to do is single click, and do I need to come down? Yeah, so I can come down the rest of the way. Is there any other that I need to look at? Not so much. See that. Okay, so there's another line here. So again, let's see, if you want to recenter the map, you can right click, go to view, and zoom to fit. That will help you recenter it. Or you can use this drop down and use this zoom to fit. And this is easier to do, and that way you can get recentered. So you're going to be adjusting that as you go, just in case you have to scale or kind of zoom in a little to see what you're doing. So here's another line. So again, I'm going to try to come and get close to the center. It doesn't have to be dead perfect. And then just come down here like that. Same thing with this line. So I'm just going to come down and systematically put all these lines in. And some of this might create a little extra work, but when you see how quick it can go, it's not that bad. And some people think they're going to save time by making all these little lines. What ends up happening is you get a lot of disjointed and disconnected vertical and horizontal points. And that causes problems because the line of sight doesn't line up. It just becomes a mess. So it's better if you have a long continuous line if you can help it. And then that way all you have to do is remove the excess. It's not as bad as trying to go in and put little lines in every single area. And this is a pretty complicated map. That's why I'm doing it this way. If it was only just a couple walls, yeah, I don't have to do it this way. But if you've got a ton of work to do and you've got several maps that are kind of complex, you're going to need to figure out a way to make this easier on you. And I think this is pretty close to what you want to do. It doesn't have to do exactly like this, but kind of get you in the mindset of creating a method to doing this. Otherwise, you're going to be spending all day on this stuff. And most of us don't have that kind of time. So we're kind of coming down and making all of these lines, vertical lines. Here's another one. Let's see this one. I'm going to make this one by itself, and then I'm going to come down here. Oops. I want to move it over just a hair. Again, hold shift, just drag the mouse down. I'm not holding the mouse button, I'm just moving it in this direction, in a vertical direction. And then this thing right here, same thing, just come down. There we go. And then I have another line up here. So what you kind of have is like this grid work here of all the straight lines that come from this project. So this makes it so that when you go back through it, you'll be able to see if you miss parts of it and you're not all over the place. And what you're trying to avoid really is to have all these separate segments, right? These are all like, this whole thing is one segment. You don't want this from here and this to there and this, that just makes a whole bunch of problems. I pay a converter $11.99. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's a good point. Drake's saying he'd rather let someone else do this. Okay, so in order to make this a little bit quicker, what I'm going to do is when you're done drawing your lines, then you're going to go in and start removing excess if need be. So over here on this very far left side, I'm going to go to the selection tool, and I'm just going to single left click and grab all of these points on the left here. So I don't need any of those. So if I grab all those points, I don't want the one on the wall, just this one sticking out. Then I can just hit delete, and that gets rid of those extra points. So, or you can just do it one at a time if you want. So single click on any lines that you've missed or forgot. And then these center ones, I can kind of do the same thing, right? So I can just left click, drag all this stuff here, and that's not exactly what I wanted to do. There we go. Let's do that. So we're going to go with that, and then just single click and delete. So that got rid of all that stuff, right? Because that looked pretty nasty. And up here, let's do the same thing. So I'm going to recenter the map, kind of zoom out a little so we can see what we're doing, and then left click and drag just so that this square here, this rectangle, only grabs the points that we don't want. And we're going to do the same thing over here. So you can see I didn't grab all of them, so I'm just going to start over, drag it down, and then hit delete. And that selects more than one point at a time. So that makes it so you can remove those edge pieces a lot sooner. So this will make it a lot cleaner for you when you're working. Now, some of this stuff's going to take a little bit more work. So let's see. So I'm going to come through and just single click on areas that I know I don't need the lines. So these are just little tails. So any of these little tails that it left behind, those can go away. And this is where it kind of gets a little bit tedious, but it's better than trying to line up every single little line. And, it just takes too long to do that. And you're going to find that out sooner or later. So it depends on how complex the map is too. Let's see, like here's a little tail that I don't need anymore. Do we got any more? Yeah, here's a tail. So these are just little points that stuck out that are left over because you're trying to draw through the line, not to the line. If you draw to the line, half the time you're going to miss because you're not zoomed in far enough and you can't see where they're connecting. And you'll find that out soon because that's going to be an annoying aspect once you start doing this. All right, so we got most of the tails out of there, like the little doodads that we don't need. So those are all just little random things that stuck out. So now we want to take out some of these bulk lines. So I'm just going to take a line and I want to cut out all of this stuff in here. I don't need all this stuff. So I'm going to left click and just drag this up to where I don't think I need that. And once I have that line in there, I'm just going to double click. I got to make sure I'm in the pointer or the selector tool. Double click and hit delete. And that's going to add all these little center pieces. And then you can go in and left click and drag all that and hit delete. So just that simple. Here's a single one. Just going to drag that. That takes that line out. So it's just a matter of getting organized and how you want to attack it, but then also understanding that sometimes you make a line to break a line. It almost seems unintuitive, but like here, I might go and take this line, come through here, and take this and come through like that, and that grabs all those, and then I need to go to the selection tool, grab that, and then just hit delete, and then you can single click on these little vertices here, and that gets rid of that center line that you don't need anymore. And then you can get rid of the tails if there's any left over. I think this was supposed to stay, so what I'll do with that is I'll go back to the line tool, and this is kind of what you're trying to avoid, is a bunch of that stuff, because that's going to cause you grief in the long run. So that's that. And then let's see, what do we got here? So I need to get rid of all of these points down here. I don't need those, so go to the selection tool, left click and drag, and I'm going to grab all these little points here and hit delete. And that gets rid of that. So this is how you can remove the lines somewhat quickly. I mean, it's not perfect, but it does the trick. So this is going to be a little bit tedious here. So I'm just going to put a line through all of these unnecessary cross lines that I had to put in earlier. I was trying to get all the line work done. So that's what this is all about. So I'm going through and just getting rid of the center lines that I don't need anymore, like this area here and this stuff here. So you're kind of like putting lines in to remove lines. It's kind of weird, but anyways, so that's just a way to kind of make this stuff. It can go a little bit faster once you get proficient and you understand how the tool functions, and it gets to be a lot quicker and easier doing it this way. Like I said, if you try to trace around it and spend all day doing that, and then if you switch back and forth between tools, that really slows you down. That's what I try to avoid when possible, because that's what really eats your time up. So this is just cleaning up. See, I can actually highlight those, clean up that whole area. So you don't need that. I can do the same thing here. So you're just cleaning up, adding lines, cleaning up lines, go through each corner. Like this thing here, I don't need this. So I think I can double click that. Yeah, I don't need that line. Don't need this one, that one, or that one. So these are just, cleanup basically. And like right here, I don't think I need those. So get rid of those. And this part right here, I don't really need these guys anymore. Let's see, what else do we have? Okay, so this, whoops, go to line tool. Go back to the selection tool, select all of these points that you don't need anymore, and hit delete. So that's a really handy method to knock these out. I think I'll leave this one here, and I'll just drag it down to this point. That'll work. And then this thing, just get rid of that tail. Some of these you leave the lines because you want to put a doorway in there. So that would be their next step. And then again, I don't need all these lines, so I'll draw a line through all those. So this is like a long hallway here. So I'm going to go ahead and do a line, left click, and drag all the way through except for the last door. I want to keep that one and this one. So I kept this one and I kept this one, but all these ones in the middle can come out. So I go to the selection tool, double click, that'll select all of these points and hit delete. And then you can go through and make like a little rectangle, grabs all those and hit delete. So this is kind of what you'll learn as you get more proficient. And see here, I drew a line through here so that I can get rid of this point here. I don't need that. And so I go to the selection tool and it's going to left click and drag these and hit delete. So this is kind of, let's do the same thing here, delete. I don't need these guys up here, these points. So I'm just going to left click and drag to select those and hit delete. And this one I didn't mean to delete, but we'll take that and move it up a little. Oops, we need to do that. So I hit escape or Control Z to get out, to kind of back up. And now what I'm going to do is I'll finish drawing this line from here to here. So I didn't mean to delete that one. So that's basically the kind of the way to attack some of these larger maps, is to figure out what you got to keep, get all your line work done first, and then go back and make these little adjustments. And it's a little bit of work doing it this way, but it's way less time consuming than doing it the other way, which is like one line at a time type thing. And that'll take too long, especially on a map like this. Like I said, if it's a small map, nah, you don't have to worry about it. So that's just some stuff you'll learn as you start using the map tools. You're not going to be perfect. It's going to take some time. You got to kind of wrap your mind around it, like, figure out how you want to attack it and then do it. It's not always cut and dry. You got to play around with it. And let's see. So I'm going to go to left click, drag all those links out, and hit delete. So that is just a quicker way to do this, I think, anyways. You get a lot more done quicker doing it this way. So now I got to go in and put those individual lines in here, which is kind of tedious, but this is the way to kind of get through it. All right, so once I have those lines in there, all I do is double click, hit delete, and there we go. Or you can left click and drag and hit delete. Gets the whole thing. Oops, I forgot one. Now go back to select, left click and drag to select all three at the same time and hit delete. So that just gets rid of that excess line that you used earlier. So this one, if I do it right, I can go and grab all of that. So this, it's just many ways to do this, but I think this way for complex maps is probably a little quicker than just adding line by line. That takes way too long. So that's just a kind of a process that you're going to have to develop for yourself, because it like I said, it can get pretty annoying once if you've done this a few times and you start realizing it's a lot of work. It's not always fun. And I notice I missed a line here kind of, or I didn't line it up properly, so I might insert that one later. But you'll get to the point where you have less and less of that problem. And see, like this one isn't quite lined up back here. That's okay. It's not going to break anything. You don't have to worry about it. It's not a commercial map that we're going to be selling to anybody. So I'm not going to let that freak me out. There we go. So you do have to learn to let go, because you try to be too perfect with this, stuff's going to take you forever. And when I first started doing this, that's exactly what I was doing. I was trying to do it perfectly, and it just can't be done. There's always something that will have to change or be fixed. So, oops, I hit Control Z, go to the pointer tool, left click. What is this? This might be, I don't know what was causing that, but you'll get the hang of it. You'll start understanding the drawbacks, the limitations, the sorts of things you can get away with. Shortcuts is a really big thing. Learn to use the little shortcuts. They're listed in the Atlassian guide. You just got to practice, because you won't remember them. You only do this once in a while, you're probably not going to remember most of the stuff. So you kind of have to go at it for a while to get used to it. And it took me, God, I want to say a couple of years to really, only because I wasn't using it enough. That's the thing. Selection tool swapping gets slower and larger your monitor too. Way over there, way over here. Yeah. Control Z was not a thing. That's right. Control Z was not a thing when this thing first dropped. It sucked. It was a pain in the butt to do this. It was annoying. Okay, so I got most of the line work done. There's probably a few spots that I missed, which I'll find as I go through. It's not, it's not the end of the world. All right, so now that we have most of that done, on these round things here, normally I would just click and just make a, just click around and make kind of like an irregular shape, but these are actually pillars. So I will use the ellipse tool, and I want to make sure I'm on the wall tool, and I'm just going to single left click and drag till I get roughly the shape I want. And I'll do the same thing over here. And it doesn't have to be perfect because you can move these. So I'll go back to the selection tool after I've made that, double click, and then click on the center and then move it into position. So again, I'm just going to double click and move this to where I want it to go. And that, you have to make sure you're in the selection tool, not the drawing tool. So that took care of that part. And then if I wanted to do this section, all I got to do is do a little square here, and I'll just kind of come through here and do this. And then go back to this and single click to get rid of the points I don't want anymore. Actually, yeah, I don't want that one anymore. And if you want to get rid of a point, you can single click, and then up here it says remove selected point, so I'm just going to remove the point. That's all you got to do. You don't, like, let's say you didn't want this one, you do the same thing. If it drives you nuts, and you got to get rid of it, just single click on a point and remove the point. So if that's something that bothers you, there you go. So these are just, ways to make this a little quicker. Now these objects here, you're probably just going to be able to climb on top of these because they're knocked over. So you might put terrain on here. What I'm going to do is put glass around it because I don't know exactly how tall they are. Maybe they are 6 feet in diameter or whatever, but what I'm going to do is just put glass. So I'm going to use a window, and I'm just going to roughly click around. So I'm just going to go to line tool and just kind of click around this. It doesn't have to be perfect, just as long as you get the point across that players can't just walk through it. And this will allow to have a conversation. Like if they want to climb on top, they're going to have to make a check or fly up. And then you can use this to kind of corral them away from just walking through this, because it is debris that's pretty good size. So all this is going to do is block movement. So they'll be able to see it, but they're not going to be able to just walk through it. And that's kind of how I handle those kind of things. I don't always put terrain on it unless it's really tall. Then I might put terrain. Like if this was something you could fly up to, and stand on it or something, then I would possibly make that terrain. This here is kind of a drainage pool. So I'm going to do the same thing with the glass. I'm just going to make an area in here. And they have to talk to me before they can go through it. So I'll just start up here, and I'm in the window tool, and I just kind of click where I think it needs to go. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then just kind of come out here. It's probably not there, so let me hit Control Z. Let me start over. It's probably here is what I want to look at. So I'll just come through here and just kind of single click around till I get to there and then join them up. So again, this is just a window, but they're just not going to be able to walk through there. They're going to have to talk to me about it. It's not because they can't. That's because they have to realize there's liquid blood, and I need to talk to them about it before they just walk through it. So that's the only reason I put that there. Same thing with these. Now this is interesting. This is something that we used to do back when this tool first came out, is you can make these like little bars and move, kind of like make this like a glass piece right here. So I might do that, is just bring this up a little, and then I'll probably, make this to where it's just a window so they could still see through it. They just can't walk through it. We used to put little lines or little bubbles around here so you would kind of do like the fence type of look to it, but you don't even have to do that. Just take a line tool, make sure you're in the window, and then I'm just going to start up here, well, probably here, and just come around and make my own little window. And it's just going to be like a, like a little a dog leg. Just like that. So I would do that for all 4 of these corners because that's like a fence, and that's so that they can look down through the fence or the jail cell or whatever you want, because it's a prison, so they can watch their friends get mangled. And this is a living thing, by the way. It's kind of disgusting, but it's that's a mouth inside there. You can't really tell. It's like these little mouths, but it's really big. But this would be something I could see using in Avernus or something like that. So make a really cool map for something like that. And this is about as large as I would go in regards to dimensions and size of the map. You get any bigger than this, hey, thanks, Drake. You get any bigger than this, it's going to be unmanageable. It just becomes a burden. As people will try to make the whole town, and that's okay if you're just using it for a reference. But if you're going to play with it like a battle map, you want it kind of like individual maps. Yeah, Empire of the Ghouls would be a good map. Yeah, I've seen that map. It's pretty cool. Okay, so let's say you didn't like the way you did your line work. You can always come back and make sure you're on the selection tool and come back and make adjustments. So if you have to be perfect, you can always come back here and adjust them later. Just get the main lines in first and then go back and make your little micro edits. See here, I missed a spot, so I'm going to double click on this and then hit delete. That gets rid of that. So all these other spots, like these walkways, all I have to do is put a door in there, and that should take care of that. So if I go to the door tool and rectangle, all I got to do is just left click and drag, and that'll make a doorway for me. It's really simple. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. This is not that hard once you get familiar with the tool and how it, what you can and can't do with it. Let's see, let's get this and draw a line. I want this to be a wall. I want to remove this one. That's what I'm doing. And now go back to selection tool, left click, drag. Yep. And then like if you want to get rid of that point, let's say you don't like it, it's driving you nuts, you just single click and click on remove the point, and it'll get rid of that point. So this is just, once you get to this point, it's a lot easier because now all I got to do is put all the doors in. So that's just making rectangles in most cases. So there's a door, and just kind of coming through here and taking out the doors. And I said they don't have to be perfect as long as they're functional and they're not broken. So that's really the key here. Functional and not broken. So I wanted to talk about this. So you don't want a whole bunch of data points. So for instance, I'm going to do this ring here just as an example. So the way I would do this thing if this was a wall is, instead of having these big like thousands of points right here, you can do is, if you see something like that, you don't think you think that's too many, you can actually go to the selection tool, double click, and that'll select all these points, and then simplify selected occluders. So yeah, that took out that wasn't my intent, but when you have a cavern system and you've got a gazillion little dots everywhere, that's where that comes in handy. So I would leave that one because it kind of makes that perfect circle, but and something that doesn't need to be perfect, you can remove that out. So again, go to rectangle, go to door, and I'm just putting in the doorways now at this point. So here's a door. These are fences, so I'm going to have to take this wall out and redo that, but here's a doorway through here. There's one here. There's one down here. So these are all lock doors too. So you can lock them. Move this over. Oops, I didn't want to do that. So this one, single click, and remove the point. Now we're going to go back to the door, put the door in there. So there's some adjustments that have to be made there, but generally speaking, that's kind of, what you're going to be facing. So like this line has to come out. So you'll find out, you've missed a couple. It's not the end of the world. So this, go like that, bring that out here and delete that. And then you might have some little shortcomings here. So take this, and I'll probably draw a line through here just to have that continuation. But this is the kind of stuff I want to avoid if I can help it, because that just makes a lot of extra work. But sometimes it's inevitable. Like you don't know what's going to happen. Sometimes depends on what map it is and how much time you have. So this is something I have to fix manually. It's not that big of a deal, but it can take some time away from you. So this is just a way to kind of, you start getting into this nitpicky stuff. That's what's going to take forever. So you got to try to avoid being so nitpicky about this stuff. It's not the end of the world. It's just for your friends and stuff. Who cares? All right, so that's basically how I would attack this. I put all the vertical and the horizontal lines in, then I got rid of the excess, and then I'm starting to now do all the little finer details. That's how I would do this. The doors are locked when you place them. Yeah, I think they're locked. I don't remember. Like when you exit Fantasy Grounds, I don't remember, or there might be a setting in the chat. I don't remember. It's been so long, but yeah, you have to go through and lock the doors if not. But that's not a big deal. On this map, it is kind of a big deal. There's a lot of doors, but it is what it is. I think they're locked by default. I don't remember. Maybe not. We'll find out the hard way. You start playing and go, oh crap, they're not locked. Then you have to go through and lock all the doors. So this is just, getting used to the tool, practicing, getting things to where you want them, taking your time, kind of learning the process. It's just a matter of getting used to it. So like I said before, this is going to have to be fixed because this isn't a wall. So I'm going to have to take this line out and then add in the glass like I did over there. So I'm going to add another piece of glass right here. So that would be line tool, window. So I'll come off of here. I'll just do something like that. And then if you want to adjust it, you can just go back in, make sure you're on your selection point, and just move the points where you want them. So if you don't want them, looking all goofy and stuff, you can go back and fix them. Like I said, try to avoid that though, because it's usually not worth it, and no one's going to notice. It's not like if you're selling it, it's another story. But if it's something you're doing for yourself, who cares? Pride in your work, or do you have the time to, do you got the time to go and fix it or not? It's kind of up to you. Like what's more important to you, Yep. So anyways, you start getting into that. That's when you start getting into trouble, because that's when you start making mistakes and you start deleting stuff on accident and all that stuff. So anyways, lock all doors and accept all moves button incoming. Yeah, I think unlock. I don't know. There used to be a way, like a command or something, and I think it was. Let me see if it's right/lock. I don't remember. There used to be a command that you'd have to do. I don't think that's a thing anymore. But you used to have a command, or it used to default with one way or the other. I don't remember. It's been so long. Anyway, folks, so we went from, importing a map. We had to resize it first because that thing was ginormous. If you join me late, we have these files here, and these things are huge. 16,000 by 200 by 10,800. That's way too big. We got it down to 3,840 by 2560. So that's 4 times less. So whenever you go up, it goes incrementally, like twice, 4 times, 8 times. It gets bigger and bigger. So you want to avoid big files. That's the big takeaway here. And then finding a way for you to, to speed this process up and not see. Start getting into this stuff here where I'm wondering if I should fix this. So if I wanted to fix it, left click. Oops, got to make sure I'm in the wall tool. So let's say I didn't like this line. So I'm just going to add a line or a point to get that out. And then I might redraw the line, like bring this down, then go to the line tool, start from here, work my way over. You can do stuff like that if you necessarily have to, but like I said, it'll drive you nuts if you do too much of that. It's too perfect. It's not worth it. Let me tell you, it's just not worth it. It'll just piss you off and discourage you from ever wanting to touch this stuff again. That's what happened to me. I got so pissed off I didn't do this for a while because I wasn't very good at it. I hated it, to be honest. And now that I've practiced, I kind of have an idea of what's going on with it. It's not so bad. It's just a matter of perception, practice. Here's another one I got to fix. So this is just kind of what, get the main line work done and then go from there. Because that's kind of what I'm trying to say is if you keep switching back and forth with all these different tool types, it's going to take forever. And if you don't have forever in a day, then that's going to suck. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're doing this. Make sure that you got, that's your ducks in a row. And you can go back and just make adjustments as needed, but most of the time they're not going to be needed. You're just going to make yourself a lot of work for nothing. Yep. See, there we go. You start going down this path, let me tell you, it ain't fun because you just start messing up and you just start breaking stuff and getting pissed off and forgetting basics, because you're so mad about the progress and how long it's taking that, you just get to the point where you don't want to do it anymore. And that's kind of sucks. Like, that's what I'm trying to avoid. And that's why I do these videos sometimes, is I want you guys to have a little bit more fun and not have to go through all this crap. Because this is kind of the stuff that most people don't want to deal with. They just want to play, But when you're a developer or someone who's making content, or you're really dead serious about, selling stuff on the forge or whatever, just kind of stuff you're going to have to deal with. Unfortunately, there's no quick way. The quickest way is to use it every day and to get good at it. That's probably get good is all I can say there. You can't get good overnight. Get good. That should be a shirt if it isn't already. GITGUD. Get good. I think I will make a t-shirt. It just says get good. It shows maybe it shows a guy cooking or something, I don't know. Big fat dude like me cooking on a barbecue. And it says get good, so it's maybe a guy drinking a beer on his barbecue. Get good. Another thing I do is I'll listen to music and stuff. Like when I'm not streaming, I'll just kind of listen to music and do this kind of thing, like all the final edits. That kind of makes the time go by, and I don't even notice it. But when you're focused, like hyper focused like this, and you're trying to showcase something and it goes wrong, boy, that's annoying. It can be annoying anyways. It doesn't have to be. You don't take it so damn seriously. You'll get the hang of it, and you will kind of get good at it. Get good, but it's not critical that you do. This just provides you with another way to do it. You can use other tools too. but I like using everything inside of Fantasy Grounds. I hate having to jump through 6 portals and go to this website. And go, by that time, I don't even want to deal with it anymore. That's something I want to work on more with SmiteWorks and with the community is, let's get all these resources together. Get so tired of having them scattered everywhere. It's been like that forever. You got stuff on the forums, you got stuff on the Atlassian guide, you got stuff in the Fantasy Grounds, you got stuff outside of Fantasy Grounds. I mean, it gets to the point where it's just too much. I would consider this a very advanced map to do line of sight on top of too. Yes, it is. And the reason I picked this one for a reason, because this is the kind of stuff that people do to themselves. They will pick the worst map ever and try to work with it. And I'll tell you what, you're going to learn. You're going to get sick of it, and you're going to go, you know what? Simple's better. And that's kind of what I'm trying to show here is this complexity can really get in the way, and it just drive you bananas. And it isn't fun when when you're spending hours upon hours, and then you find out, oh, it's not on the right layer. you did that too. Like you have like a problem. Like, oh shit, I just put this on the wrong layer, and then you have to go back and redo it all. So that's another thing is make sure that you have the layer selected that you were working on, and don't put line of sight on several different layers. That's not going to work out right with the doors and stuff. It'll just piss you off. You will be hating life. Let's put it that way. You will not like life once that happens, because it'll just irritate you to no end. I've had that happen where I just don't even want to deal with it anymore. It just pissed me off so bad that I just didn't want to touch it. I usually end up, belly aching and whining and crying about it, and then I get around to it again. But if you want to save yourself some headache, learn from the worst person is me. I'm the worst at this stuff, and the only way I get good at it is to mess around with it and get mad at it and then start over. That's kind of how some of us learn. We're too stubborn to figure it out. So we got to learn the hard way, unfortunately. So this, again, let me extend this line. Probably didn't need to, but I did. There's my OCD getting in the way. Here's my doorway. Huge door. Yep. So anyhow, folks, I'm going to let you go. I think this is enough torture for the day. I think we've kind of give you the idea of what you're up against sometimes. Like I said, make sure the maps are a little bit simpler than this. And I had to do all that preamble. You got to move this and do all this math, and then it gets to the point where you don't even want to do it. But the math here was so that I could figure out the aspect ratio, because when you put the grid on here, if it isn't right, it's not going to be right. We're going to find out shortly. So grid on. See, already it's off, but it's not off unevenly. So what we can do is I can take this grid, or I can take this layer, the whole map, and move it if I wanted to. But see, that's something you'd want to do before you start. But in this case, what I'll do is I will move the grid instead of the map, because the line of sight's already on it. I don't want to mess with that. So I'll just move the actual grid this time. I'll move it over. Yep. So there we go. So there's the grid. Look how big that thing is. That is ginormous. So when you start putting all these grids on here, these are 5-foot intervals. So you might want to change the 10 if you want. But then I'd change the color to maybe yellow, and then turn it down so it's not so bang in there. There we go. So that's close enough. Let's see, do we got that? There we go. Oops, wrong way. Close enough. So you get that. We don't have a grid on there. It's easier to put your own on. You got a grid on there? Good luck, because that can be annoying. Trying to line that up. You might have to take it and stretch it in the program. You guys ever used the map align tool? That's what that's for. But sometimes, no matter what you do, it's so jacked up that it's not going to work. It's never going to make it.